Hi, my name's Jeff. I'm 55 years old and I have 60 years of recovery. That doesn't mean I was born addicted. It actually reflects 3 different addictions that I've dealt with in my lifetime. I was a 3-pack-a-day cigarette smoker. Had my last cigarette February 23rd, 1979. Had a major problem with marijuana, cocaine. Had my last drug or drink February 23rd, 1991. And I was a compulsive gambler and made my last bet January 12th, 1997. I'd like to speak briefly about the 3 of them and really focus a little bit on the gambling, because that's the most recent one I've dealt with, and that's the one I am most concerned with, and I also work in the field with. I smoked, as I mentioned, 3 packs a day, and I stopped smoking through a program called Smoke Enders. Pure behavior modification. Change your brand of cigarette, change the way you hold it, put an index card around this pack of cigarettes and mark each time you had one so you became aware of what occasions triggered the cigarettes. It was a 5-week program. Wait 15 minutes after eating the first week, 30 minutes the second week, 45 minutes the third week, and so on. Take hot baths at night to drain the nicotine out of your system. It was pure behavior modification, and I was told after 5 weeks you would stop. And I was told to do something to celebrate, so we went to Atlantic City for the weekend. It's kind of called switching of addictions. And I haven't had a cigarette since that day. I was lucky. Marijuana, I began smoking at a small party in 1969 with about 500,000 other people called Woodstock. And if I missed 20 days over the next 22 years, that was a lot. I loved marijuana. I loved the way it made me feel. It went hand in hand with the cigarettes for many years. I would light a joint, smoke it, and immediately light a cigarette. And depending on how the cigarette tasted, it would tell me how good the pot was. I loved the combination. One of the stories I tell, a true story, driving 1,000 miles from St. Louis, where I was at college, to New Jersey on one match, because I didn't have a lighter and I didn't have matches that worked. So I went joint, cigarette, lighting one off the other. The car got a little smoky, but I made it. While I was in law school, I developed a problem with cocaine. And it got pretty abundant at times. I was probably buying an 8-ball 3 times a week. Using cocaine to go to sleep, what did I know? And it never interfered with my work. It was kind of unusual. I was a lawyer, and I always carried a couple of joints in my car, so that if I knew I was leaving court and not going back to my office, it'd be okay to get high. But if I was going back to my office, I wouldn't. In 1991, I was driving in New Jersey and I changed lane without signaling. And I was smoking a joint at the time. And a policeman stopped me and could have given me a slap on the wrist, but he didn't, and he booked me. And I remember talking to my therapist 2 nights later and saying, I think it's time to get help. I can get away with this once. Doing it twice is going to be a problem as a lawyer. And he introduced me to a program called the Alliance at St. Barnubus. And that was an intense outpatient program where I went 4 nights a week from 6 to 10 for 6 months, 2 nights a week from 6 to 10 for 4 months, and 1 night a week from 6 to 10 for 2 months. And it was a combination of education, individual therapy, group therapy, 12 steps therapy, creative art. And it worked for me. And I learned there that alcohol is a drug. I was never a big drinker, but I learned there that if I couldn't drug, I couldn't do alcohol as well. So I haven't had a drink or a drug since February 23rd, 1979. No, I'm sorry, it's 1991. I reversed the 2 dates. At the time, the concern that my counselors had was I clearly had gambling issues. And I really turned to the gambling more than anything else once I gave up the drugs and the alcohol. Gambling really began when I was about 14. Began with Friday night and Saturday night card games, playing with friends, and I took great pride in my gambling. I wanted to win. It wasn't about money. It was about feeling like a big shot. It was about feeling good. It was about feeling in control. It was about winning. It wasn't about the money. It was the feeling that the winning gave me. And at age 15, I discovered the racetrack and I fell in love. It was my panacea, my ideals. You know, in Gamblers Anonymous, it says, is knowing why we gambled important? And it answers the question, perhaps. But many people can stop gambling without the benefit of knowledge of why they gambled. I tend to be introspective, so I've kind of examined what made me become a gambler. And there are really 4 things that contributed to it. Number 1 was my best friend's father taught me at a very early age that whatever you did, there had to be external rewards to make it worthwhile. So we would shoot baskets for ice cream sundaes, or we'd play miniature golf for bagels. And there was always the idea that it wasn't enough simply to do your best, that there had to be external rewards. And I think down the road that became very important to me as I turned to gambling. Second, I was born with a dislocated hip. And growing up as a young man in the 1960s and 70s, there was a lot of emphasis on athletics. And so I kind of compensated for my lack of athletic ability by developing an almost encyclopedic knowledge of sports. So when it came to betting sports, I thought I knew more than the next guy. I felt very clearly about that. The third thing I looked at, and this is true with a lot of people who are compulsive gamblers, I had a real head for numbers. I would calculate odds in my head. I would go to the racetrack and figure out what odds were going to be in days before they actually posted the odds. So I'd be able to figure it out. I'm the kind who'd go to the supermarket and make sure the cash register was correct by adding along. They'd give me numbers between 1 and 100 to multiply, and I'd beat the calculators. And I think that contributed to gambling. But the fourth